Welcome everybody to our last webinar of College Palooza 2021. We are just delighted to go out with a bang with this esteemed panel of folks, and I'm going to introduce them in a second, but I thought I would just do some other quick introductions first. I'm Amy Belstra, the post-secondary counselor at Libertyville High School. My counterpart, Becky Belito, was not able to join us tonight, so we have two fabulous people sitting in for Becky. And Deanne, if you just want to introduce yourself real quick.
Hi all, I'm one of the generalist counselors at Vernon Hills High School. Been there pretty much the whole length of time that we've been established, and I'm excited to join you tonight.
And Sarah Cardinale, my assistant. Do you want to do a quick intro?
Yeah, sure. Hi, I'm Sarah Cardinale. For those of you at LHS, you see me every day in one way or another, it seems. So I'm happy to be here, and I'll be helping with the Q&A.
Yeah, so Deanne and Sarah are going to monitor the Q&A. So if you have questions, obviously we encourage you to put them in there. On that note, know that I have a whole list of prepared questions that I think will help to drive our conversation tonight. But obviously we want to make sure we answer your questions as well as we can. A recommendation, because this is a broad audience of juniors, sophomores, and parents, please try to keep your questions very much for the larger audience and not necessarily very student specific. If you have questions about your student or as a student about your situation, that would be very appropriate to schedule an appointment with Becky or I, and we would be happy, or your counselor, and we would be happy to talk to you about that stuff. So you have a sense of what we're going to try and cover tonight. I think we're going to try and cover context of, what this year has been like for admissions at highly selective schools, how their applications are read, covering things like holistic review testing. That's going to definitely be part of this topic. Applying different ways, maybe through an early decision, regular decision, restrictive early action, whatever it might be. These guys can talk about that. But those will be coming down the pike. Again, use Q&A if you have any of that. So imagine that we're all just sitting around, and hopefully you have your most comfortable couch cushion underneath you, and you're sitting there with a nice cup of tea and watching this. This is going to be our fireside chat. So let me introduce our panelists tonight. I got to tell you guys, I am just so stoked about this, because this is one of the benefits of COVID, is that one of the silver linings is that we've been able to bring in speakers from other parts of the country and not worry about the logistics of getting them physically here, but still be able to hear from them and share with their expertise. So Sam Carpenter, Sam is at Duke and is the Senior Assistant Director there. He's a graduate of Middlebury, and I think this is his 16th year at Duke, but prior to that, he was a men's college lacrosse coach for 20 years. He's been at Princeton, University of Denver, go DU, and Cornell, where he met his wife, and he has been following her now, right?
Correct.
In her career as a volleyball coach, college volleyball coach at Duke. So also has two sons, both of whom have attended Duke. One graduated and one is currently there, right?
Correct, yes.
So yeah, we're delighted to have you, and maybe we can fit some athletics questions in there as well.
Well, sure. Well, thanks for having me. Greetings from Durham, North Carolina. Thanks again.
You have way less snow than we do, I'm sure.
Actually, I won't get into that. I won't tell you that it was 70 degrees today and I was driving with my top down on my car.
Yeah, we hate you. That's just Jenna Myers joined Georgetown in February of 2020. Great timing, Jenna. Right before things shut down, right? But she's a Chicago girl. She grew up in Lincoln Park. She went to Chicago Latin it sounds like your whole career, right? And then you've worked in the admission offices at Vassar and Jefferson University and Bryn Mawr, which is where you graduated from, correct? I love your undergraduate major, geology with a minor in environmental studies. You're a good liberal arts girl. And at Georgetown, she works with their tour guide society on their multicultural recruitment team and their exploring college options joint travel team, which some of you may have received invitations to that as well. So Jenna, we're delighted to have you.
Thank you so much. Excited to, answer all of your questions. Definitely appreciate getting to, chat with everyone. Being a Midwesterner myself, go Cubs. If anyone's Cubs fans, my dog's actually named after Anthony Rizzo. So really a Chicago girl through and through.
Excellent. Excellent. There's a lot of dogs named Wrigley and Rizzo in the Chicago area, obviously. And finally, Bruce Chamberlain. Bruce is a dear friend I have known for many years. He is currently the Senior Associate Director at Georgetown, but he previously, when I first got to know him, was working at Penn, University of Pennsylvania, as the Associate Dean of Admissions and Director of Planning and Recruitment. He's also worked at the College of William and Mary. A visiting scholar at the Aspen Ideas Festival, Bruce holds his doctorate in education from Penn and serves as a trustee at his undergraduate alma mater, Gettysburg College, another fabulous school. So I am just delighted to have you all with us tonight. I'm just looking forward to this. So let's just jump in and get started. Sound good?
Sounds great. I just have to say to counter Sam, it did get up to 61 degrees in Washington, D.C. today. So
Good. Yeah, right.
I'm very excited to hit 40. So this is where we are. So it's been a heck of a year, obviously. We're all watching what's the trends that are happening with how COVID is impacting college admissions. And I wondered if you guys could just give us some context. Maybe let's set the scene with what this year has been like from your point of view. I've seen, the percentages of applications rising at a lot of selective colleges. So I wondered if you guys could maybe do that for us. Sam, do you want to start?
Sure. Certainly being test optional has driven our application numbers up. In fact, we're a little over 50,000 total applications for this cycle, which is maybe 11,000 more than we saw the previous year. It is a record for us. A little surprising, and I thought the percentage would be a little higher. But out of that number, maybe 44% of the applicants have not reported test scores. So there are still students out there who are fortunate enough to have taken testing who wish to have those scores considered in the application process. In terms of percentage increases, we've seen an increase in international applications, and this is just totally speculation on my part. But I think people are thinking with the change of administration in Washington, D.C., now they see perhaps U.S. institutions being a little more friendly to those applicants. We've seen a rise in historically excluded students, whether it be students of color, that kind of thing. We've also seen a rise in applications from women, which is kind of surprising as well. So, overall, it's challenging for all of us, but we are still seeing a very strong applicant pool.
Wow.
I might add, and Sam, Georgetown's much along the same lines. And Sam, we've given enough presentations together that I know you join me with this, that we all share. We want to make sure the next hour is very worthwhile. You learn things, and maybe you come away with even some more questions, but also not to raise the anxiety level.
Correct.
When I say, Georgetown's applications are up as well, which does baffle me a little bit, in that we're up about 30% or so. And we'll talk a little bit of nuances of applying to Georgetown, and that we're not on the common application.
Right.
Students really need to invest another, I think, easily 2 to 3 hours in applying to Georgetown over great institutions on the Common App. But we're up as well. But I do think, and knowing you, Sam, and colleagues in your offices and all the others, I think we all come to this reading process with a share, as much as we can, as our lived experiences are all very different with COVID. We're all in this together, but everybody's experience is different, some very profoundly different. But we do come with a shared sense of compassion and empathy, as much as we can gain that and show that through the medium of the application, which is not perfect, but it's a common method for students to present themselves. So, and we were just all talking a little bit offline before starting that reading is a little more complex this year, especially test optional in that way
Right.
too.
Correct.
So, which is
Correct.
interesting. And Amy, you probably have ideas as to why applications might be up, but given so much uncertainty, I think students want to cover their bases, which, and I love one of your questions coming up is making sure you have a balanced list. It's
Right.
because the regular prediction as far as admission rates and also our yields, we've never been in a situation like this before. So everybody's learning together.
Right.
Correct. Yep. Yep.
Well, and we'll get into the testing, you know, situation in a bit, because that's definitely on students and parents' minds right now, and just trying to figure out how much emphasis do I put on that. But I think that there's probably some similarities and yet some differences. Bruce, you mentioned one of them, like that Georgetown's not on the Common App. But pretend you're an application and walk us through where that application goes within your systems. You know, each of you, I'm sure, has some different ways that works, like who reads it, how many people, how much time is spent with that. I think families maybe don't always understand, again, the nuances of that. Maybe Jenna, do you want to tackle that from Georgetown's view?
Yeah, definitely. And I think, you know, we all operate under a holistic model, meaning we're looking at every single piece that you're sending to us. So it's not just your transcript, it's your entire application with your extracurricular activities, your essays. We want to get a better picture of who you are as a person. And so when we're getting an application, there are multiple eyes on it. You know, it's always something that we really want to look at applications carefully. We want to talk with our colleagues. We want to meet in an admissions committee. So there's definitely at least two sets of eyes looking at a file, moving it on to an admissions committee, you know, really making sure we're selecting, you know, the best and the brightest, but we also want to make sure that, you know, we're selecting students that want to come to our institutions as well. So really being a two-way street, but really just want to, you know, keep emphasizing holistic. You know, we are going to be looking at every single document. We are in a different year where our testing policies have changed. And so we're looking at applications with testing, we're looking at apps without testing, but we're still being able to admit really fantastic students with and without scores. So it is, you know, again, multiple eyes looking at the file. Bruce, I don't know if you want to add any more context in regards to Georgetown.
No, I fully agree. And given the volume increase, and it means longer hours for us on this end. And interestingly, and having worked at Penn and William and Mary and Ursinus before that, and I think Georgetown's process is a little bit unique in that we're old school, and I say that in a very, very good way, in that we have faculty, deans, and students still on our admissions committees, where in most other admissions offices, it is an internal process, perhaps with a faculty committee guiding academic policy and admissions policy. But Jenna and I and all of our colleagues reading files, we're also triaging to committees that just had a meeting last night with one of the committees. I guess we're all looking for silver linings, good and bad. We can hold Zoom admissions committees at 7 p.m. where we couldn't do that in a traditional circumstances. But you know, have a lively 2-hour conversations with faculty, a dean, and a current student who's only 3 or 4 years removed from this process. Each is looking at it differently, and everybody's voice is equally respected. And I learn a lot. And I think I even said that, like, I always learn something when, you know, in those meetings. So when that admissions offer is signed on behalf of the university community, it's actually true in that way, because we've had multiple perspectives on that file.
And I would agree with that. And Jenna, you kind of touched on this, but every application is read front to back. We don't pick up an application and look at GPA and throw some in one pile, you know, that kind of thing. And in every application, there's a story about who that student is. And our job is to discover what that story is. And that's what we present to the committee. And in terms of testing, testing is only one component out of many that we look at. And perfect scores don't mean that you're in. Less than perfect scores don't mean that you're out. So it is really a holistic process. Students are more than their numbers.
Let's just talk about testing. There's this big elephant sitting behind me. I'm like, let's just go there. You know, let's address him and get him out of here because he's taken up too much space. So talk about your testing policies. Let's because they're different. Georgetown and Duke have different approaches with this. So maybe let's start with that, and then let's talk about how that's kind of impacted things. Whoever wants to start.
I'll share a little bit because Georgetown's policy is different than many of our peers. I think most of the Ivies, Ivy Plus with Duke, Stanford, MIT, are test optional, where Georgetown, we're flexible regarding standardized testing. And in that we have historically, and if you look on our website, never subscribed to the policy or the program that the College Board offers called score choice, where you could pick the scores you want to send to Georgetown or to any institution, perhaps a sitting of the SAT or individual former subject tests, the SAT2s, et cetera. So Georgetown's policy is that if you do have testing, this is for the current applicant pool, that had access universally to testing until March of last year, and then they didn't from then on, their junior year, March onward. If they have testing, we ask that that be submitted as part of the application, on your honor, that those scores be submitted. If they don't have testing, by all means, we will review thoroughly and fully in comparison with all the other applications without standardized testing. Because this goes back to the thought also, students' well-being, emotional, physical well-being, and those of those in your household, my gosh, that's of paramount importance. So not putting yourself at risk in any way, even if there is a standardized testing opportunity, which are incredibly scarce. And Sam, you see this, Jenna, regionally, it varies a bit.
Correct.
Some have had more testing, others have not. And so we probably have, I'd estimate 70 to 80% of our applicant pool does have some standardized testing, but certainly very strong students without testing as well as with testing, and strong students will be admitted with testing and without testing. So, and Sam, you're exactly right, and it's not cliche, but the least memorable aspect of a file is testing.
Correct. Yep.
It's like you don't go running back like, oh, this is the student with
Right.
1520. No, it's the student that had a really unique experience, or more importantly, probably the emotional intelligence to convey an experience. And then other parts of that quality which resonate also come up in teacher recommendations, maybe in an interview, things like that. So it's the holistic review that Jenna talked about.
Right, right. During my time at Duke, we've actually lessened things in terms of testing. I think when I first started, we required subject tests, but no more. Then we required the writing portion of either the ACT or the SAT. We don't do that anymore, and I think at this point, we are certainly seriously considering about being test optional for the next cycle, application cycle as well, because the pandemic has created havoc all over the place. So yeah, yep.
So your institutions haven't made that determination yet, but they're thinking about it. The conversation is happening about future, like next year, year after that.
Yes, I think after we get through this cycle, actually, I know Christoph has been talking to the president along those lines. I think the recommendation from a couple of us as officers has also been, for instance, my region's California, and California shut down. So, there's typically not going to be any testing centers that are going to be available to kids. So, yeah.
Right. Yeah.
And I can just add for Georgetown, we, similar to Duke, we're going to revisit our testing policy for next application cycle. But, echoing again what Bruce said, not being score choice, but, again, testing, if you have it and you can submit it, that's great. But we're admitting really fantastic students with and without test scores. If you want to submit AP scores, you can, but again, you're not just a test score, you're really a part of everything. But yeah, we just are telling students to continue to monitor our website with our testing policy if anything were to change, but nothing finalized yet for next application cycle.
Well, and I guess I want to reiterate to our families that are watching and are hearing this, because we had one whole webinar just about testing. And, you know, when it comes to advice as a sophomore who's thinking about this, or a junior who's thinking about this, you know, just we're constantly reiterating it's okay. And based on what we're seeing from our seniors this year with their admission decisions, they're doing great, including at highly selective schools. So we're pretty pleased with it overall. So.
Right. Amy, if I could just add something, and this is for perhaps the students and the parents to hear. We are much more interested in what a student has done over a 4-year period in high school, as opposed to what they've accomplished sitting in a gym for 2 hours on a Saturday morning.
Thank God. Huzzah. I mean, from the high school counseling perspective, oh, thank goodness. Let's get, you know, these tests have been such a source of anxiety for
Yes.
years for students and parents, you know, and the money that has been spent on tutoring and test prep and all of that, you know, it's a new world that I think we're entering into. So we'll see where it all goes in another couple of years. But the students that you're talking to tonight are in the next 2 admission cycles. So they're definitely thinking about this. And, you know, honestly, it might be a good time to just, because they are new to this, they haven't filled out a college application yet. They may have siblings and, you know, that sort of thing that have gone through this, but maybe just to do a quick review of what is part of that application. Obviously a transcript, classes, grades, test scores potentially. Can you quickly go over that for them just so they have an idea of what's in there?
Bruce, Jenna, do you want to start? I flip a coin. Who wants to go? Yes, right.
I mean, I can kind of go over the Georgetown application because it is a little bit unique, and definitely Bruce chime in. But Georgetown does use its own application. We're not a school that's on the Common App or the Coalition, but by really having our own application, we do have students that are applying to us that are genuinely interested in Georgetown. So while we have a high percentage of students that are applying to us this year, we know a lot of them are still very much interested in attending if they were admitted. So it's a 2-part application. The first is the application itself. Takes about 10 to 15 minutes to fill out, mostly biographical information. So who you are, listing parents, guardians. So very general information, doesn't take too long. And then the second part is a supplement. So that has more of the meat to your application. Your extracurricular activities are going to live there. Your short answer essay is going to be there. And then we also have 2 additional essays for you to fill out. First one is more of a general statement, kind of similar to that personal statement you'll see on the Common App. And then the second essay does correlate to the school that you apply into. So Georgetown does have 4 different schools, and when you apply, you will select one of them, and then you'll write that essay prompt. But so that's kind of just the 2 pieces of the application. Then, of course, you'll have your supporting documents of the secondary school reports, counselor letters, teacher letters, transcripts, and so on. But Bruce, do you want to add anything else to that?
I'd just say, after reading for a little bit today and for the next couple of weeks, Amy, a shout out to you, your colleagues in the counseling, the school counselor arena, and then also the faculty, the teachers, because I think the teachers are the ones where this might not be a part of their job description. They do it because they want to support students, et cetera, or it might be. But the care and attention that teachers take with these letters, I've already jotted a few, and you'd love to do it for everybody, but you just can't with the volume that we have. But you'll drop a few emails here and there every once in a while to a teacher or a counselor that just did an amazing job, succinctly, concisely giving us a really unique snapshot of that student. And I also know the teaching loads, the counseling loads, they vary vastly across the 7,000 secondary school institutions in our applicant pool. But I'd encourage the students prospective applicants and parents, just write a thank you note, perhaps to your teachers or counselors who write those letters for you.
Always.
Because they put some real time into them, at least an hour into each letter, I'd say, for some of them that I've read. So,
Right. And those letters, that's where we really get a sense of who the student is and how engaged they are. You know, those are the things that we talk about in committee. You know, we're not talking grades and test scores in committee. You know, we're talking about what the letters say. We talk about the students' essays. We also talk about what they do outside of class, you know, and, you know, there's not a hierarchy of activities that we prefer to see, but we're trying to discover what that student is going to bring to our community other than perhaps their stellar academics, as it were.
and Sam, that's a great point, because the academics sort of bring you to that process, and each of our, and Georgetown's, I think, especially because we have our own application, you know, and Tam, you could probably say the same thing. 70–80% of the applicants we'd like to admit they're great kids, academically strong, could certainly do the work, but then winnowing that down to, you know, probably 12 to 15% this year. I'm sorry, there just goes the anxiety when I say that.
Yeah, right.
But you know, that's the challenge, and this is also where we have lively debates, because you know, we all bring our perspectives, and you might call it biases, to the process, where you know, I might prefer the extrovert. Well, you know what, that introvert who's the thought leader is going to really resonate in an environment that's going to enrich our community too. So, and those are the active conversations that we have in committee, and I love it working closely with faculty. The faculty, obviously the academics, but they're picturing them in their classroom, and the faculty will look at the teacher recommendations almost first, because they're their counterparts.
Mhm.
And so it's really interesting.
Yeah, and Bruce, I think that's a great point. When we in admissions office, we're not making decisions for ourselves. We're making decisions and having the faculty in mind, because they're the ones that are going to be dealing with those kids on a daily basis, you know? Yeah.
Well, and I this is maybe getting a little into the nitty gritty, but this is a COVID question that is definitely going to impact these guys, that hasn't even impacted the class that you're reading right now.
Yeah.
Our juniors have, you know, been doing e-school and or hybrid since for almost a year, right? The anniversary is coming up very soon. So their ability to get to know their teachers from this year, their junior year, has been limited in some ways. And I've had this conversation with students already about, you know, gosh, these teachers just don't know me in the same way because I'm a box on a screen for half of the year. Or I haven't been able to do my extracurricular activities, and you know, their list is going to look a little bit different as you review applications. What can you say to, again, maybe help to put that in context and relieve some anxiety for students who are thinking about those things?
We understand as much as we can understand that the experience at your high school is similar to other occasions, and this is again to the faculty that are working so hard, the students that are working so hard, that face-to-face eye contact that makes that immediate connection. It might be there with hybrid. It hasn't been as readily, if at all, with Zoom and distanced and see. So as best you can, and this is also where it's been interesting in talking with some faculty at Georgetown. In some cases, the online learning, the distance learning, has adapted very well. Maybe in a smaller seminar or something like that, where it can be conversation based. It perhaps has had more challenges in a larger lecture. And that's where that distance can come into play. So I would encourage you talk, first of all, and this is always a piece of advice, talk to that teacher before you ask as you ask for that letter of recommendation, and see if you both feel that there's enough information both ways for that letter to be a good one, and one that's substantive enough.
And I would also add, you can't get upset about things that you can't control. You know, Bruce, you said it earlier, we're all in this same boat together. So simply just try to do the best that you can with what is available to you. Yep.
And Amy, you touched on the point about extracurricular activities also, and a real commitment to sports or community service or volunteer work, which has been so curtailed, it doesn't always translate. And when we have huge need right in our immediate neighborhood around the globe, but you can't, for public health reasons, get involved in that way, it can be incredibly frustrating for those students that it's part of their DNA with what they want to do. And we have seen some pretty creative ways, though, of addressing immediate needs right in maybe in your own household, but also in your neighborhood.
Right.
That, to be of service, keeping your health and everybody else's health in mind. And read essays of student government leaders that have really created virtual platforms that have actually helped in bringing students and faculty and everybody together. And yearbooks that have been turned totally virtual and things like that I wouldn't think of, but some real creativity has come forward.
Yeah.
And also along those lines, Bruce, but I've seen some kids where mom and or dad are essential workers. They've been called to the workplace more, so the kids have assumed more responsibility within the household. Yeah.
I think it's that think global, act local thing that students need to bring it down into that micro level of this is what I can do within my space right now, my pod, whatever that is.
Right.
And that's okay. That is what you can control.
And I do think, and we're going to turn to the essays at some point. I don't want to overstep because you have great questions, but I think one thing that students often, and I've seen it with my reading, we always do every year, students feel that they have to write about this global policy, even though that is one of the questions in our School of Foreign Service we ask about, but a personal essay. And, there are a lot of heady issues that, boy, your generation, God bless you, is going to be wrestling with and hopefully solving. But the most powerful essays, I think, and I own my biases. I'm a sucker for a story, and one that's told from a first person perspective and an authentic 17, 18-year-old voice that can be really powerful. And if anything, we've all been tossed a lot of anxiety and new scenarios that we're not familiar with, that it's also rich for personal exploration and essay topics. So you don't have to look very far. You probably only have to look around your household or your community right there.
Right. I'll chime in with that too. But when I was able to visit schools, I did a high school visit, and a student asked me, he goes, "What do you think I should write my college essay on?" Write for yourself. It's a waste of time for you to sit in Illinois or California or Texas and fret about what you think I want to read about in North Carolina. Write for yourself.
Yeah, that story. If you can, this is a random question, but tell us about one story you've read this year that really got you. One essay that told you that story. And I know these guys shared that they're reading upwards of 40 applications a day, which is pretty intense, guys. That's a lot. So I'm asking kind of a big thing in the blur of reading season, but has there been a story that you could share?
I think
Go ahead.
one definitely came to mind. I think a lot of it, goes back to service and giving back to your communities. But, I read this great essay about a student who is really into robotics and also into community service, and realized a lot of fire stations in his, nearby hometown had, lower face masks, and decided that he was going to buy a very cheap 3D printer and work to print masks for his community, and then worked with the school to, get them to fundraise and purchase more 3D printers for the school. And I completely understand a lot of schools cannot do this. Definitely depends on your resources, but being able to purchase those 3D printers and printing masks to give out. And I think that was something that I don't think the student was doing just because I'm applying to college this year, this is going to look great on the application. It was a very genuine sense of, I want to give back to my community that is hurting right now. And it was just a really beautifully written essay. I think that's also a big piece of it, is just, you know, seeing how you are as a writer. But the story was definitely one that hit home, and definitely read it very recently, which is why it's very memorable, and remember a lot of the details. But that was something that I really enjoyed reading this year.
I have one, and it's certainly COVID related, but it was a student who realized what they had lost, whether it be some extracurricular activities, those kinds of things that they took for granted. Going to the mall with friends, getting together, doing. But another thing that the student learned and had greater appreciation for, certainly with things being locked down and the family getting together. Everybody wasn't running off and doing things like they had traditionally done as a family. So that made dinner time, family time, and they just found a greater appreciation for that, because that's what they hadn't been able to really do before. And it was really just a warm, heartfelt story, you know, that kind of thing. So yeah.
I think, again, increased sensitivities. COVID has hit families, parents have passed. Those are obviously powerful essays. And Sam, also, I know the Common App has an opportunity for students to share how COVID has affected them, and some it's affected everybody, but it's affected some far more so, and the inequalities, et cetera, the larger societal issues and everything that need to be addressed are. And again, those are rich issues that are coming forth for the next generation, everybody, especially future leadership, to be addressing. So those are powerful essays that students can harness their own ambitions and their own circumstances in that way. But Amy, my favorite is, and when I was at Penn, we would always ask every admissions office every year, bring forth one essay and that you think is the best. And again, 20 different people, 20 different perspectives, but this one essay, and I use it in workshops, very simple. It's only about maybe 400 words, not even that long, but just talks about how he and his mom were driving on, and I'm from New Jersey, the Garden State Parkway, but that's not why I like it. And how he looked over and he saw his mom falling asleep and said, "Can I drive?" And he'd just gotten his license. And for the first time ever, she said yes. And so they got out of the car, walked around, changed positions, got in, adjusted the mirrors, and then pulled out. Right. And pulled out into traffic. And then about a mile up, he looked over and his mom was sound asleep. And for him, that was sort of the epiphany that, wow, she trusts me and I'm an adult now. So it was sort of, and again, that's the sort of introspection and a moment that might be lost to 99% of us, myself included. But this young man sort of picked up on it, and it complemented the other essays in a way that it was his own voice that came through. And he also wrote well, and that was noted in the other aspects of his file too. So I don't say this wanting to put undue pressure on the student that perfect essay is going to get you in. One or two essays are not going to get somebody in, but they will add to the positivity of an overall very positive file. So we keep that in perspective.
So you said something at the beginning of this that I think is so important for students to hear, is it should sound like a 17 or 18-year-old, right? Not like a parent, not like a sister, brother, older sibling. It needs to sound like you. And you have that voice as a student, however you write, however you share that story. But I loved the examples you guys gave. Thank you for doing that, because I know that's thinking through, okay, which ones really were powerful for whatever reason. But it's a student sort of pulling back the curtain and saying, hey, here's my life. I'm sharing some vulnerability with you and showing you inside my world, whatever peek behind the curtain that is for you. But that's what's so cool about reading those essays, is you get to know students on such a different level.
No, and Amy, you bring something up because it really is, as laborious as it is, it's also a privilege because you get a snapshot on who this student is. And so again, for students that apply, Lord knows there are about what, 3,000 different secondary, post-secondary institutions out there. And so when you do apply, we thank you for that interest and also the time you put into that file. That's respected in our review process for sure.
Right.
Amy, I'm going to touch just a little bit on something. You said, you know, the essays, it needs to be the student's voice. From a parent perspective, I never saw my kids' applications. I let them do it. You know, I didn't ask, what did you write about? You know, let me read your essay. I did none of that. None of that.
And
Because
how
it
did
was
you
their
get to that
process.
point, Sam? Because you know there are parents out there looking at their students right now going, you're going to show me your essay.
Yes, yes,
Get to that
yes. And I think that's where we as parents need to take a step back and say, this is their process. This is part of becoming an adult. You know, and as hard as it is, perhaps, let them go. Let them go. Yep.
God bless you. That's awesome. And it's so true. We parents just know that as we get closer to the senior year, we will have more information and programming just for you to help you navigate this process as well, because we know how hard it can be on every member of the family. The dogs sometimes feel it. So around there. Now might be a good time, actually. Deanne and Sarah, are there questions in the Q&A that would be good to throw out there for these guys?
Yeah, I have a couple of real good questions that I would like to hear our panelists talk about. And this is a question that in my 25 plus years as a counselor has been constant. With highly selective schools, there is information or myth out there that the schools are only going to select so many from a given high school or so many from a given geographic area, northern, you know, the north suburbs of Chicago, for example. Can you please address, do you take only so many students from a specific school or only so many from a geographic area?
You mean like a quota system?
Yeah.
No, no. The applicant pool is different every year. It's that simple. It's that simple.
Where there are strong students, I think, well, there is strength amongst a strong pool. You're going to find offers going out, and sometimes that means numerous students are admitted from a school, and it might mean even a year or two later, nobody's admitted from that school. So it all varies a bit. And I do think one of the topics we might touch upon is sort of maybe institutional priorities, and one of them at Georgetown, and we're lucky because, and I'm sure Duke is the same way, the applicant pool reflects it. Ultimately, we would like a matriculating class that ideally comes from all 50 states, is global, international, because students can really learn from each other. And, you know, a student from the north suburbs of Chicago, from New Jersey, California, Taipei, and Argentina, boy, that's a great, you know, 5-person suite freshman year. So you just learn from each other. And I think in order to achieve that, we really want to make sure that those qualities are in our applicant pool as well. And so already, I'm sure for juniors, maybe even sophomores, you might be getting postal mail, but maybe not so much given the current circumstances, but emails and recruitment materials from colleges and universities that are already out there, because all those institutions want that representation in their applicant pool.
And I'll also add, sorry, I don't mean to hog things here, but we offer admission to students. We don't offer admissions to schools. Right? Yes.
Right. Yeah.
All right, Sarah, did you have one? Otherwise, I have one more that kind of stood out to me.
Yeah, I do, but you go first because this might take us in a different realm. So
Okay.
go ahead.
It has to do with summer programming.
Yeah, that's the same one.
Okay. You know, both of your schools have pre-college or programs for high school students. And I know a lot of students are thinking or hoping that if they participate in the summer program, that it will give them an advantage to their application. Can you address that?
In one word, no. I would also add this. The real advantage, I think, to a summer program at a particular institution is that it gives the student a sense of what that college campus might feel like. It gives them a sense of what sitting in a collegiate classroom, working with a professor may feel like. And if the student wants to do it just because they want to do it, it's fine, as opposed to doing it and having college admissions in the back of their head. And also understand that there are plenty of kids who would love to do it, but maybe they can't afford it. Maybe they have another commitment, whether it be a summer job, club soccer over the summer, you know, taking care of the household, those kinds of things. So, and again, it's like those extra, you know, any other extracurriculars. We simply hope that you are involved in activities that are meaningful to you. Do them because you want to do them, as opposed to having this will give me a leg up in the college admissions process.
And somebody just asked, what is a summer enrichment program? Which is always a good reminder for us to go, yeah, they may not know what that is.
That's right.
So just so you know, guys, there are a lot of, you might call them summer camps, but they're considered enrichment for you over the summer that almost every college in the country does something for high school students in the summertime. And sometimes they're classes, sometimes they're exploring an interest. Sometimes they're sports related. There's all kinds of things. We have some in our backyard that we will advertise out there, but Duke, for example, has summer programs, and Georgetown does as well. And as does Harvard and Yale. They advertise these. There's actually a kind of a separate business that runs all of these summer programs, and students often feel, well, that's got to give me the edge, you know, to do that. And Sam, go ahead and say again, does it give you an edge?
No. And again, it's like, you know, I mean, I've been in athletics previously, and my wife is certainly as well. But those summer programs are a way to keep our housekeeping staff employed, the people in the dining facilities, you know, the maintenance folks, you know, those kinds of things. Yep.
Oh, that's totally true.
Now, I was at my previous institution on the committee that wrote the agreements for summer programs, and that was explicit that attendance is not a consideration for first year admission. It continues to be, certainly at Georgetown. And I joke sometimes, and there are wonderful aspects to it, because I think the average age on campus in a traditional residential summer, if you come in July, the average age is probably 16.
Right.
The Junior Statesmen of America, I think, has their national conference on our campus. And so I'm not making this specific to Georgetown, but they can be wonderful opportunities for students to join like-minded students and really explore a passion or an interest. We, though, are also very conscious that there are means that have to come into play. There might be financial aid available, but not always. That, and Sam had mentioned this, and this is one of the biases that I own. If you've ever worked fast food at a fast food restaurant, you've got my empathy right away. Because having worked for a very short spell at a fast food place, you know, very few people are really nice to folks who are taking the order over the microphone. And it's like, boy, you learn a whole lot about society by working that job. And so the summer opportunities, you know, there are so many. Don't feel that we are looking for any one right opportunity there.
Correct. Yep.
Well, and just again, a sort of PSA out to the you know, the audience watching, summer enrichment programs are also in a state of flux right now. Some have made a successful pivot. They're going to be offered virtually this coming summer. And we're excited to see that because last summer there was nothing. So we're excited to sort of post those opportunities as we find them. So we'll put them out there for you and you can see what's there. One of the things that and maybe this isn't an application question as much as just, you know, attending a school like yours, both of your institutions, is an experience where we're always trying to encourage students to really understand the culture, the academic culture in specific, because it can be elevated a little bit. There's an expectation level that's high. And there are certainly students who thrive on that. And I think you look for that in your application, a student who's going to feel that success and challenge at the same time in that kind of environment. But if you were telling students, you know, this is the EQ, the emotional quotient that our faculty looks for in a successful student here, what would you tell students? Because I think that's important to understand that, what it kind of takes to thrive at a Georgetown, at a Duke.
Amy, that's a great question, because one thing I think institutions have a hard time doing, and maybe admissions officers have a hard time doing, is differentiating their institution beyond name and recognition. And Jenna, this is right, Jenna, I'd love for you to compliment or disagree with me, because the beautiful part is, you know, we've got in total with graduate students probably 18,000 different opinions on how to answer that. But it's because of that mix and that diversity of perspectives. I am, though, going to go back, having attended more maybe historically religiously affiliated but secular institutions. Georgetown is a Jesuit college or university, and not being Catholic myself, but there's an ecumenical aspect to the Jesuit values that, boy, it really does permeate the campus. And even being in enrollment meetings or even budget meetings, things like that, that going back to care for the whole person, cura personalis, looking at a student's complete holistic intellectual, academic, physical, emotional well-being, and then that service aspect, which I'm sure Duke shares as well, being a man or woman for others and having a positive impact. If those are, again, sort of in your DNA as a high school student, Georgetown could be a really good fit for you. And then if they're not, then is that an environment where that's, I don't want to say the expectation, but that is sort of the norm to have conversations, maybe interfaith dialogue, but also focusing on the greater aspects of why you're with us for 4 years. And then your real graduation happens when you go out for the next, 60, 70 years of your life and the impact that you have. That's sort of the expectation, that it's positive.
I'll say this, and I think students need to feel this way, but there are tons of great schools out there. They'll do well at any of them. I think college is really about exploration. It's not about deciding what it is that you're going to be when you grow up. I think you need to be excited about the course offerings. Now, again, class is only one part of the college experience. You're going to be joining a community. If all you do is go to class and go to the library and go to your room, you're not getting anything out of that institution. You're going to be somebody's roommate. You're going to be somebody's classmate. Try out for a play. Take a dance class. Take a music class. Why? Just because it sounds interesting. Just be open to the whole experience. Jump in with both feet and try something different. And that's what college, I think that's what college is. I went to an all-male parochial high school. Okay, there were no such thing as the arts. It was all Greek and Latin. You know, going away to Middlebury. I was in a couple of plays. I danced for all 4 years. You know, and that's part of the educational process as well. Who are you going to school with? You know, I think it's cool for the kid from Illinois to meet the kid from the Bronx. You know, the kid from California to meet the kid from Texas. And that's part of the learning process too. You know, so that's what I think it is. And then of course, if you get a chance, you need to talk to the kids. You know, hey, do you like your professors? How's the advising system? How's the food? You know, little things like that. Because, you know, every school has a bio department. Every school has a library, right? You're ultimately picking a place that you're going to call home for the next 4 years. That's what this process is about. You know, both my boys, we live 5 minutes from campus. You know, we never see them. And that's great. That means they found their group of friends. They figured out how to do their laundry, I guess. You know, they're just happy. And that's what you want moving forward, you know? So, yeah.
Or maybe the laundry backing up in the back. So,
Yeah.
sorry, Jenna, go ahead.
I was just going to add, and definitely echoing what Bruce and Sam said, I think you just need to, you know, find a school and be open to trying everything. And I think that's the biggest piece of advice I give to students. And I think during this college search process, it's talking with those current students. As Sam mentioned, you're talking to them about resources, the food, laundry facilities, but also talking with faculty members. You know, you really want to be, you know, have that opportunity to speak with them. And also when you're coming to campuses, not be afraid to ask questions. I think sometimes students might get a little bit hesitant to go to professor, you know, freshman year, because, you know, they want to be, you know, confident in their abilities, but you know what, college is a learning process. And I think it's so important to understand where your limits are and also when to go and ask for help. And I think that's something that you can discuss with current students right now during the search process, but then even during orientation, when you become a first-year student, is still asking those questions. But I think college is always a learning process. I think even when you graduate, there's still so much more you need to learn. I think as professionals, we're all still learning a lot about colleges and institutions and higher ed. We're also learning a lot from you. So don't think that the learning stops once you get that diploma, you know, whether that be in high school or in college, it's still going to be a continuous cycle. And that's how we're gonna, you know, hopefully continue to build a better and brighter future. So don't be afraid to ask those hard questions. Don't be afraid to try those classes that sound weird or, you know, fascinating. You know, I work in higher education, but I took a random geology class and fell in love. I'm a very big rock nerd. And you know what? I can pair the two together. I can be that STEM person. I can be that nerdy student. And then I can also be that higher ed professional. So again, just echoing what Bruce and Sam said.
Yep.
Amy, you bring up a good point, and it might well be towards the closing questions that you have, but just this conversation about what do you hope to get out of the experience, et cetera. That's a great question for both parents and for students to talk about, and sort of start to have that conversation, not of expectations, because that can be sort of onerous on the student, but sort of the hopefulness as far as what do you hope to get out of this. And
right.
It tends to fall, it can fall into two categories, equally important, I would argue. One is, I might term sort of the return on the investment, i.e. a job, grad school, whatever it might be, but then also the developmental aspect, as Sam touched on it and Jenna so beautifully. Take something you've never been exposed to before and the world is going to open up to you. And that's what, especially in a liberal arts environment, the freshman and sophomore years should really be at the core. And if there's a liberal arts core requirement, distribution requirement, whatever it might be, that's the ultimate goal. So that by first semester junior year, yeah, you've got an academic intellectual pathway that's pretty resolute because you've tested different waters.
Well said. Beautiful. I just want to say, Jenna, you rock, and see if anybody gets the whole geology.
Yeah, right.
She does.
It does, right?
Right.
All right, I have one more admission-based question, and then I think we'll start to move towards the wrap up. For our juniors and sophomores and parents who may be unfamiliar with these terms, colleges use different kinds of application plans, like early action, regular decision, early decision, and these will become options to you as you decide how you want to apply. And they have different deadlines, different criteria, different policies, and I wondered, that's always a big question as students start moving through this process, especially for the juniors. Is this a school, be it Duke, Georgetown, or anywhere, that I like enough that I want to commit to through an early action, early decision, restrictive early action program, whatever it might be. And I wondered if you guys could just talk quickly about what you might do at your institutions, because I believe it is different, and how that factors into your process.
I'll start. I do want to just preface things by saying early is certainly not for everybody. Early might be an option for you if you are a student who has reached your peak academically, that kind of thing. Certainly testing will add a whole nother layer to it, as it were, but you should feel pretty good about where you stand academically. We will ask for perhaps first quarter senior year grades, but we don't see first semester senior year grades. So again, you've got to be right there. Now, in terms of Duke, we're early decision, which is a binding contractual agreement, which means that you apply by the November 1st deadline. When we offer you admission in or around December 15th, you are then required to withdraw any other applications that you may have at that time. So certainly along those lines, you need to be, all right, if hypothetically you were offered admission to 1,000 other places, Duke would still be the only place that you want to be. I mean, that's what it is. It's like a marriage. Yes, you're it. I love you. We're done. That kind of thing. I also will say this in terms of early decision. It's not a process by which you strategize.
Thank you.
Okay? Yes. It's not a process by which you strategize.
Jenna, you can talk a little bit about Georgetown's philosophy. It's just a little bit of a different philosophy on it.
Yeah, so for early action, it's a little bit different. You're still going to apply early, November 15th, our deadline. But if you're admitted, you still have until May 1st to ultimately decide if Georgetown is the school that you would like to attend. So it's not that binding agreement. You can apply to Georgetown early action. If you get accepted, you still have that time. But as Sam was saying, it's, do you think your application is at its strongest, especially with that academic piece? We will still see that first quarter grades, and then we'll also require the semester grades once they're available. But if you think your application is at its strongest and you want to get that decision a little bit earlier, you can definitely apply early action, but it isn't that binding agreement. So you still have that time to ultimately decide. And I will just say, just for an early piece, I think if financial aid is going to be a big factor, schools have net price calculators, and you can sit down with your parents, your guardians, your counselors to fill that out to get an estimate of what your financial aid package might look like. And I know that's something that I always stress to students when I work for schools with early decision, because it is that binding piece, because you're not going to get your financial aid package until the spring. So that is another point I always want to make sure students and families are aware of as well.
I think Georgetown's policy.
One real advantage to early, I think, is perhaps that you know where you're going to school in December. Yeah.
And we expect seniors to keep the grades up. If there are any seniors or
Yes.
parents of seniors on the call.
Yeah, right.
FYI. In Georgetown's policy, as Jenna so well said, and I think when you step back, just looking at it philosophically, 6 months to an 18-year-old between November 1 and May 1 is very different than 6 months to a 55-year-old. And sort of that match, and Sam, I don't know if you'd agree or not, so, but just that maturation that, you know, Duke or Georgetown might be your absolute first choice on November 1. Georgetown will not asking for that commitment up front gives you the flexibility to change your mind. And you know what, you make the decision that's best for you. And ultimately, and I know, Sam, you look at this at Duke, we do at Georgetown, freshman to sophomore retention typically hovers at darn close to 99%, which, and obviously if there are problems with retention, we'd go back and look at the admissions process. Are we, you know, I don't want to say we want maximize retention, but if there are issues, can they be addressed in our review process? And so, but we're seeing success. And if students leave, it's really for highly personal, specific situations that might well have, you know, anywhere could have occurred.
Right. Right. And I'll add this too, and specifically since, you know, early decision at Duke is binding, and this hopefully will tamp down any anxiety out there, but we're not looking to fill our first year class via the early decision process.
Yep.
You know, far and away, the majority of applications that we receive, review, are associated with regular decision.
I have had the question, for what financial circumstances are they let out of the binding contract? Because like you said, with the net price calculator, a student should have a good idea. But, you know, every year I get at least one student asking me, in what case?
The only way you can get out of it at Duke, for instance, if you were to say the financial aid package isn't enough. But again, that's why students and families need to do their homework and not strategize. Oh, hey, I'm in, I'll be able to afford it. No, use the net price calculator, get a sense of things, sit down as a family and discuss. Yes, before hitting that send button. Yes.
What if it's just a matter of the family miscalculating what they think they will be able to afford?
That may happen, you know, and I'll say this, and every year it's different. It's not like we have that scenario every year. But certainly 1, 2 scenarios, 2 cases where that will occur. You know,
Deanne, I think you'll also find all of our offices, especially in that it's a very good thing. The FAFSA, the free application for federal student aid, is estimated 2 years prior. So tax information is available for parents to fill out, but personal family circumstances might well have changed in the last 18 months.
correct.
And if
Correct.
they have, we've done exponentially more. And this is great colleagues in our financial aid office. Certainly want to be as generous but equitable as possible. And so if there are extenuating circumstances, the CSS profile has room for narrative, I believe. And I think especially for students who are admitted, we want to work with the families as closely as we can to make it work out.
Yeah.
Right. Thank you.
Just again, as a public service announcement out to our audience, every one of our College Palooza webinar panelists have spoken about net price calculators, and you guys have hit it home again, which is amazing. And I will tell you that as a college counselor, I am often meeting with parents and students, and I'll say, so have you guys done the net price calculators for these schools? And they'll be like, yeah, no, we haven't done it yet. And I will tell you, it's not something that you can do super quickly because you're going to need to gather some financial information. But it is a huge part of this for families to go into any college knowing what your out-of-pocket cost may be. So thank you for, again, reiterating that to our families. And I will just tell you all, you don't have to do it this weekend, but somewhere in the, as you start to develop a college list, it's a good thing to do because it may remove a school from your list. One of the questions was, how common are merit scholarships? And I thought you could answer that pretty quickly as well for our families. At highly selective schools, do you see a lot of merit scholarships?
Okay, first off, I'll say this. We have a limited number of merits. Now, and this is the differences between schools. Okay, there are some schools out there that will say, you got straight A's, so here's an extra $10, and they'll call that merit aid, right? Okay. At Duke, our merits cover full cost of attendance. Okay, and they are not awarded on the basis of GPA test scores. There are other personal qualities that they're looking for. But that having been said, every applicant is automatically considered for any of the merits that Duke offers. But since there's a limited number, okay, but again, it's a mistake to assume that the only way you can attend Duke is via merit, because that's not true. Again, both of our schools, and like a lot of other schools, we will meet the full demonstrated need of any applicant. So if you qualify for everything, you get everything.
Yep.
You know, now that having been said, as a parent as well, I know we all want our kids to go to school for free, but that's not happening. It's you know, it's not happening. Yeah, yes, my wife and I work at Duke, but it's not like our kids went to Duke for free. We still applied for financial aid. Yes. We had 2 in school at the same time. Yes. We had to apply for need-based aid. Yeah. Yeah.
Duke has the AB Duke, which is pretty amazing. I think you will find across the Ivies, and I think it's an Ivy agreement even, that merit scholarships are really not included. It's need-based aid. You have maybe 37, 38 institutions, private institutions in the country that are both need blind and guaranteed to meet full demonstrated need. It might vary a little bit for non-US citizens, non-permanent residents, international students, but you know, it's need-based aid this year, upwards of 140 million for Georgetown in need-based aid. And now, Amy, it's funny, just to go back a quick thing, you hit on something exactly right. The minute you mention taxes or tax returns to anybody, I will find a reason to procrastinate. And I don't think I'm alone with that. In that there's a faculty member in the economics department up at Wellesley about 4 or 5 years ago that said, isn't there a way that we can streamline the net price calculator? Because it will take, I've done it, it takes about 20, 25 minutes, and my taxes are not overly complex. But he has developed this tool called My Intuition that can boil it down from about 15 questions to 2, 3, 4, or 5, depending on your circumstances. Now, if you have a business farm supplement or a divorce non-custodial situation, which we do see, it might not be applicable, but within about 2 or 3 minutes, parents could get a ballpark figure just from My Intuition. And his whole, in listening to him speak to our staff 2 years ago when Georgetown became a partner with it, it's overcoming that stigma of having to go get your tax returns.
That's right.
It's like, parents, I'm with you, you know, as far as a hesitancy to do it, but we hope to streamline the process and start that conversation.
Right. Well, I have one more question for you guys. And I want our families to know just how generous you have been with your time, because these guys are all on Eastern time, guys. So it's an hour later for them. And yes, they are going to go read more applications after we're done. So talk about dedication to your craft. We are extremely aware of that. But you know, when I hark back to our first webinar of this series, our speaker talked about the pyramid of selectivity, and your institutions are definitely at the top of the pyramid. And as a college counselor, working with my, you know, juniors at Libertyville and Becky Belito with hers at Vernon Hills, you know, we're always trying to stress the importance of a balanced college list. And part of it is because it helps to ease the anxiety. And I wondered if you guys could maybe speak to that as well, and how you advise, maybe words of wisdom you would give to families as they're approaching this process and considering highly selective schools.
The need for balance is essential. I always get nervous when a student, when we're in real time, when we do a college night or something, they'll tell me all the schools they're applying to, and that ambition is great, but they've also just mentioned, 7 or 8 of the most selective institutions in the country. And have a spectrum of selectivities on your list. Now, having 1 or 2, maybe 3 that, and I hate that, and Amy, you can help me with these terms, like a reach, I just don't like that, but it's going to be aspirant. Some that are in the middle, and some that you feel, I want to say comfortable. Maybe confident.
I call them foundation schools.
Foundation schools.
Yeah, that's my term. You're going to get in, and you really, really like that school. So
just one piece of advice, though. I remember when I was at William and Mary, which is an amazing institution, a state institution, certainly very competitive in state, incredibly competitive out of state. Interviewing a young man, we did interviews back in the day. Somehow I ended up on the morning shifts. I had 1 at 9, 1 at 9:30. I'm not a morning person, by the way. But the student came in, had a conversation. He was at the top of his class from a magnet high school in Virginia. Exceptional candidate, will be competitive at any institution that he applies to. And he was also very candid. And I asked him, well, what brings you to William and Mary today? And he goes, well, I was talking with my college counselor, and she thought that this would be a good safety school. You don't want to say that to an admissions officer. I applauded his honesty, but his diplomacy had a ways to go. And it was a positive interview, but for that blunt honesty, which again, a genuine 17 or 18-year-old. And we had such a conversation in committee about him because the interview was there, and I said, this kid is stellar. He's already doing original research, Siemens sort of prize caliper sort of research. And the faculty in the room are like, I want him here. Bring him here. We will humble him maybe. But in long story short, do you know where he went? William and Mary. Mm-hmm. And he actually got one of the Jefferson or the Monroe scholarships that funded summer research for him. And he thrived there. And so those schools that you might think are on your safety list, might be the very best matches for you with that. So don't discount those schools. They can be phenomenal.
And Bruce, I want to add to that too. I dislike the term safety school. Yep. Because what you may feel is your safety school might be your best friend's top choice. Mm. So avoid that. You should be happy, glad to attend any school on your list. It's that simple.
The ideal is your list is all first choice schools.
Okay. Yes.
That would be fabulous if students could do that. Yeah. Awesome. All right. Well, friends, this has been absolutely lovely. If you do have any parting words that you want to share with our families, of course, we'd welcome that. But I would personally like to thank you so much for giving up time during what I know is a very busy time for you all. And I'm delighted that you could do this with us. So thank you from me. And for all those listening, please share your thank yous in the Q&A. But any final words, if you just want to say, may the odds be ever in your favor, whatever it may be.
Yeah. Well, Amy, thanks for having us. But this is to the kids. But have fun with this process. Have fun with it. I really think the college selection process is one of some self-discovery, some self-exploration. On a basic end, what size school do I want? How far away from home do I wish to be? What subjects do I think I might like to study? And have fun with it. And really all you're doing at this point, you don't have to decide where you're going to school now.
Thank goodness. Yes.
Right. All you're doing is gathering options, and have fun. Have fun. Ideally, things will somewhat return to normal, so you'll have a chance to set foot on college campuses that you've dreamed about, that you've heard about. Particularly with a couple of my boys, it was a chance to sit in a car for 5 hours and bond as you drive to the next institution or whatever. But yeah, just have fun with it. Just have fun with it. And college are not going to be the best years of your life. They're not. They're not. Bruce kind of alluded to it earlier. Life expectancy in the US is what? So you graduate college at 20 something. And so for the next 50 some odd years, it's all downhill. No. Jenna touched on it earlier. Just because you graduate from college, you don't stop learning. You don't stop developing new interests. Yeah. College is just a stepping stone. Just a stepping stone. So
I definitely, just to add to that, I think during this time, listen to your family members, to your siblings, to your friends during the search process, but also listen to your college counselors. If they're suggesting a school, like, I think this is a great school for you, I think you would really thrive here, listen to your college counselor, because that might end up being the school that you ultimately attend and you thrive at. And I think that's a piece of advice I always share to students. That was something that I was shared with during my college search process, many years ago. And I ultimately went to a school that was added to my list at the very end, and I loved it. And so I think it's really important to just listen to the people around you, because they're all here to support you. And also, if you have questions about the college search process, all of our admissions offices, we have email addresses. You can reach out to us. If you have questions, don't be afraid to reach out and ask. I think I said this earlier. I am the admissions officer for Illinois. So if you have questions for me, you can definitely reach out. I'm more than happy to help you. But just listen to people who are around you, and their advice can be really, really helpful for you.
Well done.
Good point. I might just one quick to the parents. In everybody's life experience is different, so we all speak from our narrow little slice of the world. But if I'm probably more in age aligned to the parents on this call, and have gone through over the last decade, both parents having various forms of dementia and Alzheimer's, and sort of needing to be deliberate with the absolute things that have to happen in the caregiving aspect, but then also needing to step back and think, what do I want to create here, and what memories that are fleeting do I want to make sure I try to create as much as possible? And so on the front end here, as you work with your son or daughter, be deliberate, and first off thoughtful, and then deliberate as far as what experience you want to create in looking at colleges and universities in the process over the next 2 years. And those thoughts are probably towards the positive, growing closer to your son or daughter, having honest conversations and shared anxieties, because change brings about anxiety, not the least of which is in the middle of a pandemic. And so, being thoughtful and deliberate about your own goals and how you can get closer to your son or daughter in this, that can only help the process. So.
Love it. Thank you so much. Students and parents, you will be hearing from both Becky and I with more information. We'll obviously share this recording out again if you want to watch it again or share it with others. But everyone have a great night. Thank you so much.
thank you.
And we appreciate you guys. Thank you.
Great to be here. Thanks.
Good night. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks so
Thank
much.
you,
Oh, and
Deanna.
thank
Nice
you.
to see you, Jenna. Nice to see you, Amy.
Sam, always good.
Yeah.
Yep.
And thank you to Deanne and Sarah for managing our Q&A.
Yes.
Very much.
Yes.
Yay.
Okay. Good night.
All right, good night, everybody.
Bye,
Good night.
everyone.
Bye. Yep.
Bye.